2,000 years ago, a Jewish man from Nazareth gained followers who believed he was the long-awaited Messiah. Today, billions follow him as the Son of God. But the Jewish people, his own people, never accepted that claim. Not then, not now. So, why not? Let's break it down. This isn't a question of dismissing Jesus as a person. Jewish tradition generally acknowledges he existed and taught. The disagreement is about identity and role. What was the Messiah actually supposed to do? And does the historical and theological evidence line up? Let's go through the four main reasons. In Jewish theology, the Messiah isn't just a spiritual figure. He's a real, historical, verifiable leader with a checklist of concrete accomplishments drawn straight from the Hebrew prophets. He's expected to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. He's expected to gather the scattered Jewish people back to the land of Israel. He's expected to usher in an age of universal peace, the kind described in Isaiah where, quote, nations don't train for war anymore. And he's expected to end tyranny, suffering, and idolatry, bringing the whole world to recognize God. From a traditional Jewish perspective, look around. The temple isn't standing. Wars didn't stop. Injustice didn't disappear. If the Messiah's arrival is supposed to visibly transform the world, and the world still looks like this, the reasoning goes, then the job simply hasn't been finished. And in Judaism, partially fulfilled doesn't count as fulfilled. Here's the deeper issue. And it's less about historical events and more about the nature of God itself. Judaism is built on strict monotheism, one indivisible God who doesn't take human form. This shows up as early as the Torah, where it says, I'm paraphrasing, that God is not a man. So the idea of the Messiah being divine, being God in the flesh or part of a trinity, that's not a minor disagreement. It conflicts with the foundational understanding of who God even is. Second, atonement. Christian theology often centers on the idea that Jesus' death atones for humanity's sins. But in Jewish tradition, atonement works differently. It comes through teshuvah, genuine repentance, through prayer and through charity, directly between a person and God. No mediator required, and certainly no need for a sacrificial death. And third, the Messiah in Jewish thought is fully human. A descendant of King David, a brilliant political and spiritual leader, yes, but a man, not a divine being. So even setting aside whether Jesus fulfilled prophecy, the category of what he became in Christian theology doesn't match the category Judaism was expecting. A lot of the disagreement actually comes down to translation and interpretation. Take Isaiah chapter 7, the famous line about a virgin conceiving a child. In Jewish tradition, the original Hebrew word used, alma, simply means young woman. It doesn't necessarily imply virginity. That's a pretty significant translation gap. Or take Isaiah 53, the suffering servant passage, which Christians often read as a prophecy of Jesus' crucifixion. In classical Jewish interpretation, this passage is usually understood to be about the nation of Israel itself, suffering collectively throughout history, not a single individual centuries later. So it's not that Jewish scholars are ignoring these texts, it's that within the Jewish interpretive tradition, going back centuries before Christianity even existed, these passages were already understood to mean something different. One more key piece. Judaism holds that the covenant given at Sinai, the Torah, is eternal and unchanging. There's actually a warning built right into the text in Deuteronomy. Don't follow a prophet, even one who performs miracles, if what they teach contradicts the established law. Since early Christianity developed the idea of a new covenant that reinterpreted or superseded Jewish law, dietary laws, Sabbath observance, and so on, this was seen from a traditional Jewish lens as exactly the kind of departure that Deuteronomy warns against. Not because the message was wrong in tone, but because changing the terms of an eternal covenant isn't something Jewish theology considers possible from anyone. Quick but important note. Judaism isn't a single monolith on any of this. Maimonides, one of the most influential Jewish philosophers, laid out a very rationalist, this worldly view of what the Messiah would do. Other movements throughout history, including messianic movements around figures like Sabbatai Zevi in the 1600s, show that ideas about the Messiah have been debated and contested within Judaism itself long after Jesus. So this isn't just Judaism versus Christianity. It's also an internal, centuries-long conversation about what redemption even looks like. So when someone asks, why don't Jews accept Jesus as the Messiah? It's not one single reason. It's a combination of unmet prophetic expectations, a fundamentally different understanding of God's nature, a different framework for atonement, different translations of key texts, and a deep commitment to the idea that the Torah's covenant doesn't get rewritten. Of course, Christian theology has its own well-developed responses to every point I just raised. Different readings of the same prophecies, a different theology of atonement, a different understanding of covenant. That's a whole other video. If you want me to break down how Christian theology responds to each of these points, let me know in the comments. That might be part 2. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.